With Pedro Pascal making some of the worst decisions during the press tour for Fantastic Four, one major development going on now involves how he yet again attacked fans and said some of the most offensive things yet toward Marvel fans that is already creating a division ahead of the release on July 25th. Pedro delivered the following.
That at first glance isn't too bad, but there's plenty of lingering shots, and the longer it lingers, the more you're like, that's a little bit unsettling, that's a little weird. But even like a Galactus's face, it did not have the same realism of, say, a Thanos.
Where Bob Iger is now having issues with Pedro Pascal. Just days ago, they already punished Pascal by reducing his press tour appearances and urging him to stop and cut it out with his politics. However, now Bob Iger took action against Pedro in the most unexpected way possible, where he canceled an entire featurette for Fantastic Four that was filmed, focusing strictly on Pedro as Reed Richards.
What happens when your franchise savior becomes the reason everything falls apart? For Marvel, the Fantastic Four reboot was never just another superhero movie. It was supposed to be the reset button, the bold comeback that would pull the MCU out of its post-Endgame slump. A fresh cast, a massive $200 million budget, and at the heart of it all, Pedro Pascal, a fan favorite, the man who brought charm to chaos in The Mandalorian and emotional weight to every role he touched. Marvel believed they had found their next Tony Stark, but what they got instead might be the biggest behind-the-scenes disaster in studio history. Because while fans were celebrating the casting news and edits of the cast were going viral, something was already cracking behind closed doors.
That are just really beginning to actually have a lot of Marvel fatigue and Pedro Pascal fatigue. That is very much real. And like I said earlier, his politics, his overall view on activism, it is not helping at all in the least when it comes down to Marvel and Disney. And the fact that Marvel and Disney allows him to go on that train wreck of viewing, of course, or spewing his politics into the public eye, it goes to show you that they really don't care at all.
Whispers of creative clashes, rehearsals derailed, and then complete silence. Until now, what really went down inside the rehearsal rooms, the press interviews, and that now infamous table read? Why did Marvel's most reboot turned into a quiet cast mutiny, with insiders saying the entire production collapsed before filming even started? This isn't just a story about an actor and a studio. It's about control, power, and the unraveling of Marvel's carefully polished image. And trust me, the story is far messier than you think.
One that bugged me a little bit about the film is that there's a lot of plot armor thrown around in the film. Not even necessarily, I mean, sometimes it's for the characters, but a lot of it's just for plot elements. In order for certain things to work, it requires...
By the time Marvel announced the Fantastic Four reboot, the studio was already losing its grip. After a string of underwhelming sequels, forgettable Disney Plus shows, and lukewarm fan reception, even the most die-hard MCU followers were starting to tune out. The hype machine wasn't broken, but it was sputtering. Marvel needed a win, a big one, and Fantastic Four was supposed to be it. This wasn't just a reboot, it was Marvel's shot at redemption. A new cast, a fresh tone, and the kind of budget that screams confidence. $200 million to be exact. On paper, it looked like the perfect comeback. Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, bringing elegance and edge. Joseph Quinn, fresh from Strand. Things, playing the impulsive, Gen Z-friendly Johnny Storm. Eben Moss-Backrack from The Bear, stepping in as the grounded, emotionally rich Ben Grimm. And then there was the crown jewel, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, the brilliant but haunted leader of the group. The internet exploded. Fan edits, reaction videos, cast tributes. Marvel hadn't seen this level of organic hype since Phase 1.
Pedro Pascal making things worse, far worse than they really need to be, by getting overly political and striking back at both fans and critics that are bringing up box office debates, box office arguments about this movie. Now, we have to point out that the opening weekend worldwide, where it stands right now for Fantastic Four, is $218 million.
This was the lineup fans had been begging for. The energy was electric. But behind all the celebration, something was already wrong. Whispers of tension, rumors of control issues, and a creeping sense that Marvel's comeback might not go according to plan. Even before cameras rolled, cracks were forming. During early rehearsals, insiders say the vibe felt off. Not chaotic, not hostile, just off. The chemistry read, a key step in locking in the team dynamic, didn't hit the way Marvel expected. Most of the cast leaned into the ensemble energy. But Pedro Pascal, reportedly, he had a different vision. It started small. Notes during scenes, suggestions on tone, feedback on dialogue. At first, it seemed like standard input from a passionate lead. But soon, that passion started feeling more like possession. Pascal allegedly pushed to reshape Reed Richards, not as a comic book genius, but as a brooding, philosophical figure grappling with trauma and existential dread. A darker, moodier take. That shift didn't sit well with everyone. While others were focused on building a team story, Pascal's input reportedly kept circling back to one thing: Reed's pain, Reed's depth, Reed's journey. It wasn't aggressive, not yet, but the balance was starting to tilt. And behind the scenes, Marvel execs began to hear the same thing from multiple corners of the production. This isn't feeling like Fantastic Four anymore. The tension was simmering, but no one knew it was about to boil over. It was supposed to be routine, a full cast table read, final script in hand, execs watching closely, and director ready to lock the vision. But what happened that day became the breaking point, the moment everything started to unravel. According to insiders, Pedro Pascal walked in holding a marked-up script. Not notes, not tweaks. A completely reshaped version of several key scenes. And when his turn came to read, he didn't stick to the page. He delivered his version. Slower, heavier, more brooding. Scenes meant to show the Fantastic Four as a unified team now centered almost entirely on Reed Richards' internal monologue. The rest of the cast sat quietly, shocked, unsure whether it was a creative exercise or a hostile takeover. Pascal reportedly paused after a particularly rewritten scene and said flatly, "If this is just another cookie-cutter Marvel flick, I'm wasting my time." No one laughed. The room went silent. Vanessa Kirby barely made eye contact. Joseph Quinn, usually the jokester, stared down at his script. The director gave a neutral nod and moved on. But the damage meant done. The read ended without a word. No applause, no group huddle, just silent exits, one by one. And just like that, the cast was no longer a team. They were witnesses to a takeover they never signed up for. The next morning, Marvel woke up to silence, and that's when the panic began. No one from the cast responded to follow-up calls. Rehearsals were postponed. Emails went unanswered. One assistant reportedly told execs, "They're not saying anything," because they've already decided. It wasn't a formal protest. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was quiet, calculated, and final. The entire cast had effectively walked. Behind closed doors, Marvel scrambled. Studio heads were blindsided. This wasn't a typical creative disagreement. It was a full-blown fracture. And according to leaks, it wasn't just about the table read. It had been building for weeks. Pascal had allegedly taken control of everything, from tone and dialogue to costume concepts and even the lighting mood for scenes. Every creative decision, big or small, was starting to funnel through him. The project was no longer about the Fantastic Four. It was becoming a personal character study wrapped in superhero packaging. And the rest of the cast? They weren't interested in playing supporting roles in someone else's passion project. Executives tried to salvage it. Emergency meetings, mediation offers, rewriting sessions. But the energy had shifted. The cast had made their move. Marvel just hadn't realized how much damage had already been done. Marvel tried to downplay the chaos. On the surface, everything looked fine. Press junkets, social posts, and cast appearances continued as planned. But fans could tell something was off. In early interviews, Pascal dominated the conversation. He wasn't just promoting a movie. He was lecturing about legacy, trauma, and the burden of intellect. At one point, he described Reed Richards as a philosophical martyr trapped in a capitalist feedback loop. The re of the cast? Uncomfortable smiles, blank stares, side glances that spoke louder than words. A clip went viral of Vanessa Kirby giving a tight-lipped smile while Pascal spoke over her. Joseph Quinn jokingly called himself the comic relief, literally. Eben Moss-Backrack muttered, "It's his movie now, I guess." Off mic, but clearly picked up in the audio. Fans noticed. So did the media. Social platforms lit up with speculation. Are they beefing? Why does no one look happy? Why is Pedro doing all the talking? Marvel quietly began damage control. Interview guidelines were updated. Talking points were restricted. Sources say Pascal was asked to dial it back and focus on team messaging. But the red flags were already flapping in full view, and the public was starting to connect the dots. This wasn't just awkward promo. It was a slow-motion implosion, playing out in real time. With public perception unraveling and the cast barely speaking off camera, Marvel made one last desperate move, a private retreat, off-site, no press, no crew, just the cast, the director, and a few top execs. The goal? Reset the energy, rebuild trust, salvage the film before it completely collapsed. But from the moment the group arrived, it was clear. No one was on the same page. According to insiders, Pedro Pascal walked in with a stack of new script notes. Again, the cast barely reacted. Vanessa Kirby reportedly said, flat out, "We're not rewriting this again." Tension was so thick. The director had to step outside multiple times just to regroup. That night, a private roundtable discussion was held. Everyone had a chance to speak, and what came out was brutal honesty. Quinn voiced frustration about being sidelined. Kirby expressed feeling erased from the emotional core of the film. Moss-Backrack questioned whether the project even resembled the original story anymore. And Pascal? He listened, said little, and by the end, simply replied, "Maybe I'm not the right guy for this." It wasn't a blow-up. It wasn't dramatic, but it was over. The retreat ended with no new agreements, no fresh direction, just a quiet realization that the vision had splintered beyond repair. Marvel's dream reboot had officially slipped out of their control. After the retreat ended in silence, Marvel knew they had a problem they couldn't spin. The reboot was stalled, the cast was fractured, and their star, the man they built the whole thing around, was mentally checked out. But instead of making it public, Marvel pivoted to what they do best, controlling the narrative. Behind the scenes, the studio launched what insiders called a containment strategy. Press tours were quietly delayed. Scheduling conflicts were floated as excuses. Sources claim Marvel's legal team began renegotiating contracts, preparing for an eventual swap, but without drawing attention. Leaked reports suddenly appeared, suggesting Pedro Pascal was in talks for multiple projects and balancing heavy commitments. Headline shifted from Fantastic Four drama to rumors about him joining The Last of Us Season 2 full-time. Subtle, intentional, strategic. Meanwhile, the rest of the cast remained silent. No official statements, no Instagram posts, just a slow erasure and the original hype. Fan pages noticed that cast interviews disappeared from Marvel's YouTube. Promotional tweets vanished. It was as if the project had been scrubbed clean. And when the recasting announcement finally dropped, it was buried in a press release, one line among dozens. No fanfare, no press conference. Marvel wasn't rebooting a movie. They were rebooting a mistake and hoping no one noticed. The Pedro Pascal situation wasn't just a casting misfire. It was a symptom of something deeper. Marvel, once known for airtight planning and unshakable control, was now dealing with a pattern: production delays, creative clashes, and a growing disconnect between the studio and the talent they bring in. This wasn't the first implosion. Blade? Multiple rewrites, directors cycling out, and Mahershala Ali nearly walking away. Or Ant-Man 3, where even the visual effects artists went public about being overwhelmed and under-supported. It's no longer just rumors, it's a trend. Insiders say the studio's once collaborative environment has turned into a corporate machine, with executives micromanaging every creative choice. Directors have less freedom. Writers are boxed in by universe-building demands. And actors, they're expected to follow the formula, not question it. The fallout from Fantastic Four wasn't just about losing Pascal. It was about losing credibility. Fans noticed. Industry professionals noticed. And for a studio that built its empire on precision and trust, that kind of slip is dangerous. The illusion of Marvel's invincibility? It's cracking. And if they don't fix the core issues behind the scenes, no amount of recasting or reshoots will save what's coming next. Marvel wanted Fantastic Four to be reset, but instead, it exposed just how fragile the empire has become. Pedro Pascal wasn't the villain here. He was the mirror, reflecting the chaos Marvel's been trying to hide. The question now isn't just who will replace him, it's bigger. Can Marvel still lead an industry it no longer seems in control of? Because if one casting shakeup can derail an entire reboot, what happens when more actors start pushing back? Let us know in the comments. Was Marvel too controlling? Or did Pascal push too far? And more importantly, can the MCU still be saved? Hit that like button if you made it this far. Subscribe for more insider breakdowns. And get ready, because this story isn't over.